A lost city sleeps beneath the waves of our collective imagination. For over 2,000 years, the myth of Atlantis has beckoned, a haunting siren song of a glorious civilization that vanished in a single day and night. By the end of our journey, you will understand why this sunken legend is far more than a bedtime story. It is a mirror held up to humanity's greatest hopes and deepest fears. Was Atlantis a real place swallowed by the sea, a philosopher's brilliant fiction, or a distant memory of a cataclysm that reshaped the ancient world? We will trace its echoes from the writings of Plato to the silent ruins at the bottom of the Mediterranean, and even to the vast, empty eye of the Sahara Desert. The true power of this tale lies not in finding a sunken city, but in the timeless questions it forces us to ask about ourselves. What does it truly mean for an entire world to be lost? The story of Atlantis arrives in our world through a conversation. In the year 360 before the Common Era, the philosopher Plato crafted two dialogues named Timaeus and Critias. These were not history books but philosophical works where characters debate the nature of the ideal state. Yet within this framework, Plato introduces a tale of staggering detail. He describes a mighty island empire positioned in the Atlantic Ocean just beyond the Pillars of Hercules, what we call the Strait of Gibraltar today. This civilization, he claims, flourished a staggering 9,000 years before his own time. That places its peak around 9,600 years ago, a date so ancient it predates the pyramids of Egypt by millennia. Plato insists this is not a fable but a forgotten truth. He explains that the story was preserved by Egyptian priests in the city of Sais, who shared it with the Athenian sage Solon. So from the very beginning, Atlantis is presented with a pedigree, a chain of custody from a wise elder culture to the Greeks, lending it an air of solemn authenticity. Now let us picture the island itself as Plato paints it for us. Atlantis was a marvel of divine engineering, a gift from the sea god Poseidon to his mortal son, Atlas. The capital city was a masterpiece of geometric harmony. Imagine a great central hill encircled by 3 rings of shimmering seawater, alternating with 3 rings of fertile land. Bridges and tunnels connected these rings, allowing easy passage. At the very heart, on the central island, stood a magnificent temple to Poseidon, sheathed in precious metals. The outer ring was protected by a towering wall coated in bronze, tin, and the mysterious metal orichalcum, which Plato says gleamed like fire. Canals bustled with ships from across the empire, bringing tribute from conquered lands. The soil was so rich it could support 2 harvests a year, and the island teemed with elephants, fragrant plants, and every resource imaginable. This was not just a city, it was a utopia of abundance and order, a perfect society blessed by the gods. But why would Plato, a thinker concerned with justice and governance, spend so much time describing a lost paradise? The answer lies in the story's tragic end. The people of Atlantis, initially virtuous and pious, grew arrogant. The divine blood in their veins diluted over generations. They became greedy, militaristic, and morally corrupt. They sought to conquer the entire Mediterranean, enslaving all in their path. It was only the city-state of Athens, Plato's own ideal republic in its ancient form, that stood against them and won. And then the gods delivered their final judgment. In one terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods, the entire island of Atlantis was swallowed by the sea, vanishing beneath the waves forever. The tale serves as a powerful moral lesson about the fate of nations that abandon wisdom for power, that trade piety for pride. It is a warning etched in the geography of a sunken continent. So the very first whisper of Atlantis we possess is not a sailor's ghost story, but a philosopher's grave parable. Yet the description is so vivid, so geographically precise, that it planted a seed far more potent than Plato may have intended. For when you give a lost world a name, a map, and a fate, you invite the world to go looking for it. Plato's Atlantis was not merely a kingdom of men, it was a realm born from the heart of a god. To understand its legendary splendor, we must return to its very foundations, a story of divine love and celestial engineering. According to the philosopher, when the gods divided the earth among themselves, the great island in the Atlantic fell to Poseidon, ruler of the seas. There he encountered a mortal woman of extraordinary beauty named Plato, who lived on a hill at the center of the island. Smitten, the sea god sought to protect her. His solution was an act of creation that would define Atlantis forever. With his immense power, he carved the very land itself, sculpting 3 concentric rings of water and 2 of earth around Plato's hill. He did not dig these moats with tools, but by the sheer force of his will, making them impassable to any mortal. This was not a fortress, but a sanctuary of love, a divine gift to shield his beloved from the world. Upon this sacred, engineered ground, Poseidon and Plato had 5 pairs of twin sons. The firstborn of the first pair was named Atlas, and to him, Poseidon granted the central island and the title of Supreme King. The entire island continent and the ocean that held it would bear his name, Atlantis and the Atlantic. His 9 brothers each received one of the other kingdoms, creating a federation of 10 royal lines, all bound by blood and divine decree. These were not ordinary rulers, they were demigods, their veins carrying the ichor of a deity. To guide them, Poseidon established a sacred law, which he inscribed upon a pillar made of the legendary metal orichalcum, placed within the temple at the heart of the city. This law was their covenant, a set of principles meant to ensure justice, piety, and harmony for all generations. So from its inception, Atlantis was blessed. It was a land shaped by a god's hand for a mortal's safety, ruled by his direct descendants and governed by divine law. This origin story explains the civilization's staggering early achievements, its perfect order, and its unimaginable wealth. It was quite literally a paradise made real, a utopia with a royal family descended from the sea itself, but herein lies the core tragedy of the myth. A society founded on such pure, divine favor carries within it a perilous seed. For what happens when those demigod kings, generations removed from their celestial father, begin to forget the laws on the pillar? What happens when the favor of the gods is mistaken for a right rather than a sacred responsibility? The stage is now set not for a city, but for a fall of mythic proportions. The capital of Atlantis was a symphony in stone and water, a testament to what a civilization touched by the gods could achieve. At its heart, rising from the central island, stood the grand temple of Poseidon and Plato. Its exterior was a spectacle of divine tribute, plated entirely in silver, while its pinnacles shimmered with gold. Inside, the ceiling was a marvel of ivory, gold, and silver, and at the center stood a colossal statue of Poseidon himself, standing in a chariot drawn by 6 winged horses, so immense his head brushed the roof. This was more than a building, it was the soul of the empire, a physical anchor for the covenant between the people and their founding deity. Surrounding this sacred core, the city unfolded with impossible elegance. The 3 rings of land were not merely barriers, but thriving districts, each connected by bridges wide enough for a chariot to pass a team of horses. The outermost ring, facing the open sea, was protected by a formidable wall sheathed in bronze, and behind it, another coated in tin that gleamed in the sunlight. But the true wonder was the innermost wall encircling the citadel, for it flashed with the glow of orichalcum, a metal Plato described as more precious than anything except gold, possessing a fiery radiance all its own. The engineering was as miraculous as the adornments. The Atlanteans harnessed the island's volcanic warmth, creating public baths with both hot and cold fountains, a luxury of comfort and cleanliness. Their greatest feat of practicality, however, was water. A complex canal system, wide and deep, cut through the rings, acting as bustling aquatic highways for merchant ships from every corner of the known world. These canals fed into a vast, sheltered harbor, always crammed with triremes and trading vessels, their masts like a forest upon the water. Beyond the metropolitan wonder, the island continent itself provided boundless wealth. Lush plains yielded 2 harvests a year, forests provided endless timber, and the mountains were rich with veins of every metal. Herds of elephants roamed freely, and fragrant flowers, fruits, and spices grew in abundance without need for cultivation. This was a land that asked for nothing and gave everything, a paradise of self-sustaining plenty where innovation and nature existed in perfect harmony. For generations, this was the reality of Atlantis, a utopia where divine law, human ingenuity, and natural bounty created what might have been the most advanced and serene civilization to ever exist. Yet such staggering perfection invites a haunting question. In a world where every need is met, every comfort provided, and every ambition within reach, what is left for a society to desire? The answer, tragically, will be found not in creation but in conquest. Yet the very perfection of Atlantis contained the seed of its own destruction. For generations, the kings upheld Poseidon's sacred law, governing with justice and piety, but the divine ichor in their veins grew thin with each passing century. The direct connection to their godly ancestor faded into distant memory, and with it the humble reverence that once guided them. Human nature, with all its frailties, began to eclipse their celestial heritage. A slow, corrosive change took hold within the gleaming rings of the capital. The kings and their people were no longer satisfied with the boundless prosperity of their own island. The sight of their immense harbor, filled with the wealth of a dozen subject nations, ceased to be a point of pride and became a hunger. They looked east beyond the Pillars of Hercules toward the ancient lands of the Mediterranean basin. An arrogance settled upon them, a belief that their power and their birthright entitled them to dominion over all. Their ambition transformed from stewardship to conquest. Plato describes this shift with chilling clarity. The rulers of Atlantis, he writes, assembled a great army with the intent to enslave every person living within the Mediterranean, including those who would one day become the people of Athens and Egypt. This was no mere border skirmish, it was a war of total subjugation, born from a philosophy that saw other cultures not as neighbors, but as resources to be harvested. The moral decay was now complete. The society that was once a model of divine order had become a machine of imperial greed. The sacred laws inscribed on the orichalcum pillar were ignored. The temples where they once honored Poseidon now echoed with plans for domination. The canals that carried trade now ferried troops, and the forges that once crafted beautiful works of art turned to producing weapons of war. This is the profound heart of Plato's allegory. Atlantis falls not because of a weak foundation or poor engineering, but because of a failure of character. The myth is a stark warning about the cycle of civilizations, how the greatest danger to a paradise is not an external threat, but the internal corrosion of its own virtues. When pride replaces piety and greed replaces gratitude, the stage is not just set for defeat, it is set for utter annihilation. The gods, it seems, were watching. And they would deliver a verdict as absolute as the ocean is deep. The judgment of the gods was as swift as it was absolute. With no warning, the very ground beneath Atlantis, once so stable and blessed, began to tremble with a violence never before known. The earth cracked open, and the great temples plated in silver and gold crumbled like sandcastles. The concentric rings of water and land, Poseidon's own design, churned and buckled. Then came the sea. Walls of water higher than mountains surged over the island continent, sweeping across the fertile plains and through the grand canals. There was no escape, no high ground to seek. In one terrible day and night of fire and flood, the entire civilization was erased. Every palace, every bridge, every last trace of the 10 kingdoms was pulled beneath the waves. Where a mighty empire had stood, only a vast, churning expanse of ocean remained, its surface soon settling into an eerie calm. Plato adds a haunting geographical detail in his account. The destruction was so complete that the sea above the sunken land became unnavigable, choked with a shallow layer of mud and debris. This impassable shoal, he writes, is what still blocks the way for any who would try to sail out into that part of the Atlantic Ocean. This is the core of the cataclysm. It was not a random tragedy, but a deliberate cleansing act. The gods did not merely destroy a city, they unmade it, ensuring its physical memory was as lost as its moral compass. The ocean itself became both a grave and a seal, hiding the evidence of divine punishment beneath its timeless waves. Atlantis was purged from the world, leaving behind not ruins but a story, a ghost of a paradise that chose power over principle. Its final legacy was not one of gold or orichalcum, but of a warning echoing across the centuries about the price of arrogance when faced with forces greater than ourselves. Perhaps the most compelling truth about Atlantis lies not in the ocean floor, but in the pages of philosophy. Before we embark on a search for sunken stones, we must rest in a quieter possibility that Atlantis was never a place at all, but a magnificent dream. Many historians and scholars argue persuasively that Plato, a master storyteller, crafted the entire tale as a powerful literary device. His goal was not to document a historical catastrophe, but to illustrate a moral one. Think of Atlantis as a thought experiment, a fictional utopia created to serve as a perfect mirror. In his famous work, The Republic, Plato outlines his vision of the ideal state, a society ruled by philosopher kings guided by wisdom and justice. The Atlantis story, written later, can be seen as its dark counterpart, a cautionary tale of what happens when that ideal state rots from within. The glorious, divinely planned city becomes a detailed blueprint for failure. Its concentric rings symbolize perfect order, but that order is ultimately hollow without the virtuous citizens to uphold it. The story of its corruption and divine punishment serves as the ultimate parable about the fragility of civilization. In this light, Atlantis is not a lost city, but a lost ideal. It represents a dream of perfect governance, of harmony between human ambition and natural law, that humanity can envision but seemingly never sustain. This interpretation transforms the myth from an archaeological puzzle into a profoundly personal meditation. It asks us to consider what corrupts our own societies, what ideals we have sacrificed for power or comfort, and what cataclysms we might be inviting through our collective arrogance. The haunting power of Atlantis, then, may stem from this very quality. It is a dream we all share of a golden age and a nightmare we all fear of losing everything we have built. To ponder Atlantis as Plato's allegory is to drift in the space between those two poles, a deeply thought-provoking realm where history fades and timeless questions about human nature rise to the surface, waiting just behind your closed eyes. Plato's story of divine punishment sinking into the sea feels hauntingly familiar because it is. The theme of a great cleansing flood is not unique to Greece, but a thread woven through the tapestry of human mythology worldwide. Long before the tale of Atlantis was written, the ancient Sumerians and Babylonians told of a catastrophic deluge. Their Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories we possess, describes a wise man named Utnapishtim who is warned by a god to build a great boat to survive a world-ending flood sent to punish humanity. The parallels to the later biblical story of Noah and his ark are unmistakable, suggesting these narratives flowed from a common, ancient source in the Mesopotamian world. Far to the east in Hindu scriptures, we find the legend of Manu, a king warned by a fish that is actually an incarnation of the god Vishnu about an impending flood. Manu builds a massive ship, surviving the deluge to repopulate the earth and preserve the seeds of all living things. Across the ocean, indigenous cultures in the Americas hold their own flood memories. The Maya speak of a rageful heart of sky that sent a great flood to destroy a wooden race of humans. Tribes in the Pacific Northwest tell of a time when the waters rose to cover even the mountaintops, with only a few survivors escaping in canoes. This pattern is too widespread, too deeply embedded in cultures that had no contact with each other to be a simple coincidence. It points to something profound in the human psyche, a primal fear of the ultimate eraser, water. Our ancestors lived intimately with coastlines and great rivers, witnessing their destructive power firsthand. A cataclysmic flood represents a clean slate, a terrifying yet potent symbol of a world washed of its sins and mistakes, ready to begin again. When we place the myth of Atlantis within this grand global tapestry, it transforms. It ceases to be just a singular Greek parable and becomes part of a fundamental human story. We are not merely listening to Plato's warning about arrogance. We are tapping into a deep collective memory, or perhaps a deep-seated fear that echoes from every corner of our ancient past. The lost city then becomes the ultimate symbol of this universal theme, a specific, glittering name we have given to that nameless dread of the rising wave. That universal fear of the flood is only one reason the story lingers. The deeper, more personal pull of Atlantis is its profound sense of loss. We are not just haunted by the wave, but by what the wave took away. The myth presents us with a golden age, a time of perfect harmony and unimaginable advancement, shattered not by an asteroid or an alien invasion, but by the very people who lived within it. This is a story of paradise lost, and the cause is our own flawed nature. It is a narrative that implicates us, suggesting that within every great achievement lies the potential for a great fall. This theme resonates because it feels true, echoing in the collapse of empires throughout our own history, and perhaps in the quieter failures of our own lives. We see in Atlantis a reflection of our highest potential and our most self-destructive tendencies, a beautiful, tragic duality that is endlessly compelling. Adding to this allure is the tantalizing whisper of forgotten knowledge. What if the Atlanteans possessed wisdom far beyond our own? What if their understanding of energy, architecture, or the natural world was so profound that its echoes can still be felt? This idea suggests that survivors scattered by the cataclysm might have carried fragments of this advanced science to the shores of Egypt, to the builders of the Maya, or to other ancient cultures. It is a seductive thought, offering an elegant solution to the mysterious leaps in human innovation found across the globe. It transforms Atlantis from a mere sunken city into a mother culture, a single, brilliant source for the scattered sparks of civilization. This layer of mystery invites us to look at every unexplained ancient marvel, from the pyramids to massive stone walls, and wonder, could this be a legacy of the lost? This potent combination, a paradise lost by its own hand and a fountainhead of secret knowledge, is why the dream has never faded. For over 2,000 years, through the rise and fall of countless real empires, the ghost of Atlantis has persisted. It is the ultimate historical mystery, not because it is the oldest, but because it is the most complete. It offers a name, a map, a history, and a moral, all wrapped in the enigma of the deep sea. It is a puzzle with just enough pieces to suggest a picture, but never enough to complete it. This is why generation after generation has felt the pull to search, to theorize, to write, and to dream. As you drift towards sleep, it is the perfect mystery to surrender to, a vast and silent question mark at the edge of the world, waiting in the dark waters of both the ocean and the mind. The dream of a sunken world slept for centuries, a quiet murmur in ancient texts. Then, in the bustling, steam-powered age of the 19th century, a man decided it was not a dream at all, but a lost chapter of human history waiting to be recovered. His name was Ignatius Donnelly, a former American congressman from Minnesota with a restless, brilliant mind. In 1882, he published a book that would fundamentally reshape the Atlantis myth for the modern era. Its title was a bold declaration, Atlantis, the antediluvian world. Donnelly was not content with Plato's allegory. He approached the story as a detective would a cold case, assembling what he believed was overwhelming evidence. His central thesis was breathtaking in its scope. He argued that Atlantis was not merely a large island, but a vast continent situated in the mid-Atlantic Ocean. This was the true cradle of civilization, a place where humanity first advanced beyond the Stone Age, developing agriculture, metallurgy, and sophisticated architecture tens of thousands of years ago. Then came the cataclysm, the Great Flood remembered in global myths. But Donnelly proposed a crucial twist: the continent did not vanish without a trace. Its people, the enlightened Atlanteans, escaped in ships. These refugees, he claimed, became the founding fathers and mothers of every great ancient culture we know. According to his narrative, when those survivors reached the shores of Egypt, they built the pyramids. When they sailed to Mexico, they taught the Maya to construct their temples and chart the stars. The similarities between distant cultures, from pyramid building to flood legends, were not coincidence but a common inheritance from a single, magnificent source. To prove his point, Donnelly filled his book with pages of comparative mythology and linguistics. He pointed to sun worship appearing in both the Americas and the Old World. He noted stories of global floods, as we discussed, and saw them as eyewitness accounts of the same event. He even suggested that the Egyptian god Osiris and the Central American god Quetzalcoatl were actually memories of the same Atlantean leader. His methods were enthusiastic rather than scientific, often leaping to connections that mainstream scholars dismissed. Yet the power of his work was not in its academic rigor, but in the sheer, captivating story he told. He crafted a grand, unified theory of human history, one that explained the world's mysteries with a single, elegant, and profoundly romantic answer. Ignatius Donnelly gave the myth a new kind of life, transforming it from a philosophical warning into a historical puzzle with global stakes. He laid the dreamlike foundation upon which all 20th century Atlantean speculation would be built, inviting everyone to look at the ancient world and wonder, what if we all came from the same sunken home? The search for a real Atlantis must begin not in the vast Atlantic, but in a much smaller, sun-drenched sea. For many archaeologists, the most compelling answer lies not in the deep ocean, but in the heart of the Mediterranean, with a civilization whose story feels eerily familiar. This is the Minoan hypothesis, a theory that ties Plato's myth to a tangible and truly cataclysmic historical event. On the island of Crete and on the smaller volcanic island of Thera, now known as Santorini, a remarkable culture flourished over 3,500 years ago. The Minoans, named for their legendary king Minos, built a sophisticated maritime empire. Their palaces, like the great complex at Knossos, were sprawling labyrinths of multi-story buildings, complete with advanced plumbing, vibrant frescoes, and vast storerooms. They were master sailors and traders, their ships carrying goods and ideas across the eastern Mediterranean, from Egypt to Anatolia. This was a peaceful, wealthy, and artistically brilliant society, a thalassocracy or sea power that matched the description of a prosperous island empire. Then, around the year 1600 before the Common Era, the ground beneath Thera tore itself apart. The volcano at the island's center erupted with a force almost unimaginable. This was not a simple lava flow, it was a cataclysm now ranked among the largest volcanic events in the last 10,000 years. The eruption blew the center of the island into the sky, creating the massive, water-filled caldera we see at Santorini today. Geologists believe the initial blast would have been heard across continents, and the ash plume would have darkened the sky for days, but the true devastation for the Minoans came from the sea. When the volcano's cone collapsed into the emptied magma chamber, it triggered a titanic tsunami. A wall of water, perhaps over 100 feet high, raced southward across the Aegean Sea. Within an hour, it would have slammed into the northern coast of Crete, scouring the land, obliterating ports, and sweeping away the Minoan fleet, the very source of their power. This was followed by earthquakes and a relentless rain of volcanic ash that buried settlements and poisoned farmland. In a single day and night, the vibrant heart of Minoan civilization was shattered. Their great palaces were damaged beyond repair, their trade networks severed, their people scattered. While the culture limped on for a few more generations, its golden age was irrevocably over, drowned and buried. Now consider the echoes. A powerful seafaring island empire, advanced and wealthy, is utterly devastated by a sudden geological catastrophe involving earthquakes, floods, and a descent into ash. The timeline is wrong, of course. The Minoan collapse predates Plato by over 1,000 years, not 9,000. But memory is a fluid thing, especially across centuries of oral tradition. Could the story of this disaster have been passed down, becoming exaggerated and mythologized over time? Could Egyptian priests who traded with the Minoans have preserved a garbled account of the thorough eruption, a tale of a great island kingdom that sank beneath the waves? For many, this is the most satisfying connection. It provides a real archaeological anchor for the myth, a historical kernel of truth around which Plato's philosophical pearl could form. The Minoan hypothesis does not give us Atlantis in all its Platonic detail, but it gives us something perhaps more profound, the likely inspiration for one of humanity's most enduring dreams of loss. The Minoan hypothesis offers a compelling, grounded explanation, yet it cannot quiet the siren call of the wider ocean. For those who take Plato at his word, the search must lead beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the vast, rolling expanse of the Atlantic itself. This is the realm of grander, more speculative dreams, where the map is not the Mediterranean coast, but the empty blue of a planet still largely unknown beneath its waves. Theorists look to island chains that dot the mid-Atlantic ridge, the volcanic seam that runs like a spine down the ocean floor. The Azores Archipelago, a cluster of Portuguese islands over 800 miles from the mainland, is a prime candidate. Could these green peaks be the mountaintops of the drowned continent, all that remains above the waves after the great subsidence? Similarly, the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, with their own ancient and mysterious past, have been suggested as fragments of a larger, lost landmass. Some have proposed an even more dramatic geography, a sunken microcontinent sometimes called Atlantica, that once bridged the gap between the Americas and Europe, providing a pathway for early human migration and cultural exchange long before recorded history. This idea of a land bridge speaks directly to the theories of Ignatius Donnelly, suggesting a physical explanation for those tantalizing cultural parallels between the old and new worlds. In the 20th century, writers like Charles Berlitz popularized these oceanic searches, infusing them with a new sense of mystery and potential discovery. He and others pointed to enigmatic underwater formations, like the so-called Bimini Road off the coast of Florida. This line of rectangular limestone blocks resting in shallow water looks for all the world like a man-made causeway or a collapsed wall. While most geologists identify it as a natural beachrock formation, its perfect timing, discovered in the late 1960s during a surge of interest in the paranormal, cemented its place in Atlantean lore. Sonar scans of the deep Atlantic have also revealed strange anomalies and what some interpret as pyramidal shapes or grid-like patterns on the seafloor, miles down in the perpetual dark. Each blurry sonar image becomes a Rorschach test, inviting us to see the city of our dreams in the random geology of the abyss. The scientific consensus, however, remains firm. Plate tectonics tells us that the Atlantic Ocean basin is geologically young and actively spreading. There is no evidence for a continent-sized landmass sinking there in the time frame of human civilization. The ocean floor is made of dense basaltic rock, not the granitic rock of continents, and it shows no signs of such a catastrophic recent collapse. Yet, this very lack of evidence is what preserves the mystery. The Atlantic is immense, with an average depth of over 2 miles, and less than 20% of its floor has been mapped in high resolution. We have better maps of Mars than of our own ocean depths. This profound ignorance is the perfect fuel for imagination. The Atlantic, in its silent, overwhelming scale, becomes more than a body of water. It becomes the ultimate blank page. It is a place where the known rules of geology feel distant, and the possibility of a single, world-altering exception can still, just maybe, be true. To sail into that blue horizon is to sail off the edge of the map, into a space where a lost world does not feel like a fantasy, but a secret the ocean is simply keeping for a little while longer. The deep Atlantic holds its secrets close, but sometimes the sea offers a clue in the shallows. In 1968, 2 pilots flying over the clear, turquoise waters near Bimini in the Bahamas noticed something strange on the seabed below. What they saw, resting in about 20 feet of water, was a formation that defied easy explanation. Stretching for nearly half a mile along the seafloor was what appeared to be a massive paved road or a collapsed wall. It was composed of huge, rectangular limestone blocks, many over 10 feet long, fitted together in a long, straight line that bent at a near-perfect right angle. The discovery, quickly dubbed the Bimini Road, sent a shockwave through the world of alternative history. Here, in the crystal waters of the Caribbean, was a structure that looked unmistakably man-made, a potential piece of a lost world just waiting to be found. For Atlantean dreamers, it was a moment of electrifying validation. The location seemed poetically right, lying along a potential migratory path from a sunken Atlantic continent toward the Americas. The blocks, with their sharp edges and geometric alignment, felt like the ruins of a harbor wall, a breakwater, or perhaps even a ceremonial causeway leading out to sea, now claimed by the rising waters. It was the closest thing to a smoking gun anyone had ever found, a tangible piece of architecture that seemed to whisper the name of a forgotten builder. Yet science often whispers a different story. Geologists who have studied the site argue that the Bimini Road is a stunning but entirely natural formation. They identify the rock as beak rock, a type of limestone that forms rapidly in tropical shoreline environments. As sand and shell fragments cement together over centuries, they can fracture along natural plains, creating blocks that appear eerily rectangular. The straight line and right-angle bend could be the result of jointing patterns in the bedrock, a common geological phenomenon where rock splits along parallel lines of weakness. The consensus view is that we are looking at a beautiful accident of nature, a quirk of erosion and sedimentation that tricks the human eye, which is wired to seek out patterns and order. This is the heart of the Bimini enigma, a perfect snapshot of the entire Atlantis search. It presents us with an object of profound mystery, a thing that looks so deliberately placed it feels like a message. Our intuition screams that this is the work of hands, not random chance. Yet the measured voice of analysis offers a simpler, less romantic explanation. The debate itself becomes the artifact. The Bimini Road is less about proving Atlantis and more about revealing our own deep desire to find it. We stand at the water's edge, looking down at those silent, sunken blocks, and we are faced with a choice. Do we see a road to a lost city or a beautiful geological coincidence? In that moment of uncertainty, in the tension between wonder and analysis, the true myth of Atlantis lives and breathes, not on the ocean floor but within us. But the ocean is not the only keeper of lost worlds. To find another compelling candidate for Atlantis, you must turn your gaze away from the blue abyss and toward the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Sahara Desert. Here, in the nation of Mauritania, lies one of the most mysterious geological features on Earth, a place known as the Richat structure, or more poetically, the Eye of the Sahara. From orbit, it appears as a stunning, nearly perfect bullseye, over 30 miles wide, with concentric rings of alternating rock that ripple out from a flat center. It looks so artificial, so deliberately crafted, that early astronauts used it as a landmark. This breathtaking formation has sparked a modern and captivating theory that we have been looking for Atlantis in the wrong place all along. The eye, some researchers propose, is not a natural wonder at all, but the eroded ruins of Plato's capital city. The similarities are startling when you lay them side by side. Plato described a city built on a central island hill, surrounded by alternating rings of land and water. The Richat structure presents exactly that, a central plateau encircled by distinct concentric ridges that could be the fossilized remains of those legendary earthen rings. The scale is roughly correct for a grand metropolis. Proponents of this idea, like the Channel Bright Insight, point to other tantalizing clues. Just north of the eye lie the Atlas Mountains, which share their name with the first king of Atlantis. Satellite imagery seems to show the ghostly outlines of what could be ancient, water-carved channels leading toward the structure, hinting at a time when this desert was not a desert, but a lush green landscape with rivers and lakes, a description that fits the Atlantean plain. Could a cataclysmic event, like a massive flood or a sudden shift in climate, have buried this civilization under sand instead of water, preserving its skeleton in stone? The theory is a powerful narrative, offering a tangible, visible location you can point to on a map. It transforms the myth from a submarine ghost story into a terrestrial archaeological mystery waiting to be excavated from the dunes. Yet geology tells a different, though no less magnificent, story. Scientists explain the eye as a symmetrical anticline, a dome of layered rock that was pushed upward by volcanic forces hundreds of millions of years ago. Over eons, wind and water eroded the dome, peeling it back like an onion to reveal the different colored rock layers in those perfect rings. The channels are likely ancient riverbeds from a wetter Sahara period, but not necessarily man-made canals. There is no archaeological evidence of a massive, advanced city at the site, no pottery shards or tool fragments that would indicate a civilization of that scale. The Richat structure hypothesis is perhaps the purest example of the Atlantis dream in action. It demonstrates how a landscape of such profound and unnatural beauty can capture our imagination and impose a story upon itself. We see the rings, and our minds, primed by Plato's description, cannot help but complete the picture. The desert, in its silent, monumental way, offers a new canvas for the oldest of dreams, proving that the search for Atlantis is not bound by the sea, but lives anywhere the human spirit sees a mystery and dares to fill it with a lost and golden age. The desert's silent rings offer one kind of mystery, but the coldest and most remote theory of all waits at the bottom of the world. In the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, there exists a fragment of a world map drawn on gazelle skin in the year 1513. It was created by an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis, who noted in the margins that he compiled it from 20 older source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. This map, a beautiful artifact of the age of exploration, should show what every other map of that era showed, a vague, unknown southern land, but it appears to show something impossible. The coastline at the bottom of the Piri Reis fragment bears a startling resemblance to the actual coastline of Queen Maud Land, Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 300 years. More baffling still, this coastline is depicted not under a mile of glacial ice, but as a temperate, ice-free land, complete with rivers and mountains. How could a 16th century mapmaker have charted a continent buried in ice for millions of years? One controversial explanation, proposed by a professor named Charles Hapgood in the 1960s, suggests the map preserves knowledge from a time before the ice. Hapgood's theory, which he called Earth crustal displacement, is a geological nightmare scenario. He proposed that the entire outer crust of the Earth can, under certain conditions, shift as a single unit over the molten mantle beneath. Imagine the skin of an orange slipping around the fruit inside. In a rapid, catastrophic event, Hapgood suggested, landmasses that were once in temperate climates could be suddenly relocated to the poles and vice versa. This, he argued, is what happened to Atlantis. The great island continent was not in the Atlantic, but was instead a landmass in a more southerly, hospitable location. The cataclysm Plato described was not a local flood, but this global crustal shift. In a matter of days or weeks, Atlantis was wrenched thousands of miles southward, its once paradisiacal climate flash frozen as it came to rest over the South Pole, where it now lies entombed beneath 2 miles of Antarctic ice. The Piri Reis map, in this view, is not a fantasy, but a surviving copy of an ancient map drawn by the Atlanteans themselves, or by their survivors, depicting the world as it was before the Great Displacement. It is a snapshot of a lost geography. This idea sits on the furthest fringe of Atlantean speculation, a blend of cartographic anomaly and catastrophic geology that feels more like science fiction than archaeology. Mainstream science firmly rejects crustal displacement, pointing to plate tectonics as the slow, proven mechanism of continental movement. The resemblance on the Piri Reis map is often attributed to coincidence, artistic license, or the map simply depicting a speculative southern continent that, by chance, aligns somewhat with reality. Yet the theory's chilling power is undeniable. It takes the ultimate lost city and places it in the ultimate inaccessible location, a frozen tomb at the end of the earth, hidden not by water, but by an impenetrable continent of ice. It suggests that the truth is not just buried, but deliberately locked away, preserved in a deep freeze at the bottom of the world, waiting for a technology or a curiosity bold enough to melt through eons of time and ice to find it. Perhaps the most seductive layer of the Atlantis dream is not the city itself, but the power that might have lit its streets. Beyond the concentric walls and golden temples lies a realm of pure speculation, a vision of technology so advanced it borders on magic, lost to the depths of time. If Atlantis was the mother culture, what secrets did her children forget? Esoteric traditions and modern fantasy paint a picture of a civilization that harnessed the very forces of nature. At the heart of this vision are crystals, not as jewelry but as living machines. Imagine great humming generators, their cores pulsing with geometrically perfect stones that tapped into the planet's own energy grid. These crystalline power sources could have lit entire cities with a soft, internal glow, powered vehicles that moved silently, and energized tools that healed wounds or shaped stone with a touch. The legendary metal orichalcum, that fiery substance Plato mentioned, might not have been a mere alloy but a superconducting material, a key component in a technology we can scarcely comprehend. With such mastery over energy, could they have manipulated gravity itself? Some stories speak of levitating stones, of massive obelisks transported effortlessly across continents, of vessels that sailed not the sea but the sky itself. Their healing arts might have used resonant frequencies and light to restore the body, viewing illness as a disharmony of energy rather than a physical invasion. This is a utopia where the line between science and spirituality vanishes, where understanding the universe meant aligning with its fundamental rhythms. The most famous proponent of this mystical Atlantis was a man named Edgar Cayce. In the early 20th century, this American psychic, known as the Sleeping Prophet, gave over 700 readings that detailed the lost continent. Cayce described a society that reached its peak around 12,000 years ago, a culture divided between the spiritually pure and a corrupt faction obsessed with power. Their technology, he claimed, was centered on a massive central crystal called the Tuaoi stone, or the Firestone. This was not a simple generator, but a terrible, living capacitor of solar and cosmic energy. It provided light, power, and propulsion for their ships and aircraft, but Cayce's narrative carries the same tragic warning as Plato's. He said the corrupt faction sought to use the great crystal for selfish, aggressive purposes, attempting to weaponize its immense power. This misuse, he claimed, led to a catastrophic failure. the firestone overloaded, triggering volcanic eruptions and ultimately causing the continent to fracture and sink. In cases telling, the very pinnacle of Atlantean achievement became the instrument of its doom. This speculative fantasy, whether from case or countless novels and films, fulfills a deep longing. It answers our wonder at ancient megaliths, our frustration with historical gaps, and our own technological awe. It presents a past where humanity, in a forgotten golden age, solved mysteries we are still struggling with today. The image of Atlantis as a high-tech utopia is powerfully anachronistic, feeling both ancient and strangely modern. It allows us to dream of a time when progress and paradise were not at odds, when advancement meant harmony, not exploitation. And in its catastrophic end, it offers the ultimate cautionary tale for our own age of crystal chips and boundless energy, a whispered reminder that the greatest power requires the greatest wisdom. This shift from technology to transcendence reveals the myth's most malleable quality. While some searched the ocean floor, others found Atlantis in the realm of pure spirit. In the late 19th century, as science and industry reshaped the world, a powerful countercurrent emerged, seeking ancient wisdom to explain modern mysteries. At its heart was Helena Blavatsky, a formidable and enigmatic figure who co-founded the Theosophical Society. In her seminal work, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, she constructed a vast cosmic history of humanity. Within this framework, Atlantis was not a singular island, but an entire epoch in the soul's journey. Blavatsky described a succession of root races, each representing a stage in the evolution of consciousness. According to her, humanity was currently the fifth root race, the Aryan. Before us came the fourth, the Atlanteans. These beings were not merely historical humans, they were giants both physically and psychically. They stood over 20 feet tall, she claimed, and possessed a profound, natural connection to the astral plane and the elemental forces of nature. Their technology, which to us would seem like magic, was actually a science of the spirit, a manipulation of life forces and etheric energies. In Theosophy, the fall of Atlantis was not due to volcanic activity, but to spiritual corruption. The later Atlanteans, Blavatsky wrote, misused their psychic powers for selfish gain and black magic. They perverted their sacred knowledge, leading to a karmic cataclysm that sank their continent. This narrative preserved Plato's moral core but elevated it to a cosmic scale, making Atlantis a lesson in the ethical use of inner power. This theosophical vision provided a rich template. It transformed Atlantis from a potential archaeological site into a symbolic homeland for every psychic, medium, and spiritual seeker in the burgeoning occult revival. The myth was no longer about finding ruins, it was about recovering a lost state of being, a time when humanity lived in conscious harmony with unseen realms. In the 20th century, these ideas flowed directly into the New Age movement. Here, Atlantis became the ultimate spiritual utopia, a place of crystal healers, telepathic communication, and enlightened masters who walked the earth. It was depicted as a society without conflict, where medicine was based on vibrational frequency and governance was guided by council of elders attuned to cosmic law. This interpretation answered a deep, modern yearning for a purer past, a time before the perceived alienation of the scientific age. The lost continent became a mirror for our own spiritual aspirations, a symbol of the higher consciousness we believe we once possessed and might one day regain. In this light, the search for Atlantis turns inward. It becomes a quest for psychic awakening, for past life memories of living in those hallowed halls, for unlocking the dormant Atlantean abilities supposedly latent within our own DNA. The physical coordinates matter less than the metaphysical coordinates, a point on the map of the soul where wisdom, power, and peace converged. This spiritual Atlantis is perhaps the most enduring of all, because it cannot be disproven by sonar or excavation. It exists in the faith of the believer, in the resonance of a crystal, in the quiet hope that we are the children of something far wiser than history remembers, and that its echo still calls us home. The spiritual longing for a higher Atlantis finds its most vibrant expression in the stories we tell each other. This sunken dream has never remained locked in ancient texts, but constantly resurfaces, shape-shifting to fit the hopes and fears of every new generation. Long before superheroes, it was the visionary novelist Jules Verne who gave Atlantis its first great modern revival. In his 1870 masterpiece, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Captain Nemo guides Professor Aronnax through a breathtaking underwater graveyard. They walk across the silent, lava-preserved ruins of the lost continent, past crumbling columns and overgrown statues, a ghostly museum frozen in time at the bottom of the Atlantic. Verne's depiction was not of a living society, but of a majestic corpse, a monument to human transience that haunts the depths of both the ocean and the reader's mind. It cemented the image of Atlantis as a physical place waiting to be found by explorers brave enough to venture into the abyss. That sense of wonder evolved dramatically in the colorful pages of comic books. Here, Atlantis did not just survive, it thrived. In the DC universe, the myth became the birthright of a superhero. Aquaman's Atlantis is a gleaming, technologically advanced kingdom, a sovereign nation of water breathers with a proud warrior culture and a deep mistrust of the surface world. It is no longer a lost human civilization, but an entirely separate species that adapted to the sea, guarding ancient magics and futuristic sciences. This reimagining transformed Atlantis from a cautionary tale into a setting for epic fantasy, a backdrop for tales of royal intrigue, heroic quests, and the struggle between two worlds. The myth became a passport to adventure. Perhaps the purest distillation of the high-tech fantasy arrived with Disney's animated film Atlantis, The Lost Empire. This version presented a city powered by a glowing, crystalline energy source, its citizens living in harmony with a technology that felt both ancient and impossibly advanced. The film leaned heavily into the idea of a mother culture, portraying the Atlanteans as the source of language and knowledge for all humankind. It captured the childlike wonder of discovery, the thrill of finding a world that surpassed our wildest dreams, while still hinting at the dangers of exploiting such power. Each of these artistic visions serves a different hunger: Verne's for melancholy mystery, the comics for superheroic spectacle, Disney's for a family-friendly adventure into a glowing utopia. These countless adaptations, from pulp novels to blockbuster films, prove something essential about the myth. Atlantis is not a single story, but a flexible template, a blank page upon which we project our own ideals. It can be a sunken museum, an alien underwater kingdom, or a crystal-powered refuge. Its enduring power lies in this very adaptability. It provides endless material for our daydreams, a shared cultural playground where we can explore themes of loss, discovery, and the tantalizing possibility that somewhere just out of reach lies a world more wondrous than our own. Every retelling is a new ripple from that same ancient stone dropped into the sea of story, spreading outward in ever-widening circles of imagination. The glittering dreams of crystals and comic books fade against the stark, blue reality of the modern ocean. In our age of satellites and robotics, we possess tools that would have seemed like Atlantean magic to Plato himself. We have mapped the ocean floor with multi-beam sonar, painting the abyss in high-resolution sound. We have sent robotic submersibles to the deepest trenches, their lights piercing a darkness that has lasted millennia. And from orbit, satellites can detect subtle variations in sea surface height that hint at massive structures below. This is the waking world of science, armed with the power to finally answer the ancient question. So what have we found in the vast Atlantic basin, the very location Plato specified? The answer, after decades of systematic search, is a profound and empty silence. The sonar maps reveal the magnificent alien landscape of the mid-Atlantic ridge, a volcanic mountain range slowly birthing new ocean crust. they show abyssal plains, seamounts, and fracture zones. But nowhere do they show the sunken concentric rings of a metropolis, or the jagged outline of a continent-sized landmass that sank within human history. The geology is clear and unanimous. The Atlantic seafloor is young, dense, and constantly moving, with no place for a lost civilization of that scale to hide. This scientific scrutiny has not ended the search for sunken cities. It has simply redirected it toward more plausible and often more fascinating targets. Off the coast of India, archaeologists and divers investigate the legendary city of Dwarka, said to be the ancient kingdom of the god Krishna. There, they have found submerged stone structures, anchors, and pottery that suggest a prosperous port settlement did indeed slip beneath the waves, likely due to rising sea levels thousands of years ago. In the Mediterranean, the discovery of entire towns like Pavloptri in Greece, submerged for millennia, proves that the sea is indeed a museum of human history. Each of these finds is a real Atlantis in miniature, a tangible piece of a world lost to the water. They are profound discoveries that rewrite local history, yet they are not the Atlantis. They lack the scale, the concentric geometry, and the specific cultural fingerprint of Plato's tale. They are evidence of a universal human experience, the vulnerability of coastal settlements, not proof of a single global mother culture. This is the poignant reality of the modern hunt. The literal, physical Atlantis that Ignatius Donnelly or Edgar Cayce described remains stubbornly absent from our charts. The dream of finding a continent in the Atlantic has been gently laid to rest by oceanography. Yet, in a beautiful paradox, this failure has done nothing to kill the myth and may have even strengthened it. Every time a robot's camera lights up a sunken Roman villa or a drowned Neolithic village, it whispers a powerful suggestion. If the sea can hide this, what else might it be keeping? The ocean has proven itself to be the greatest keeper of secrets, capable of swallowing not just small towns, but potentially entire chapters of the human story we have not yet imagined. The dream of Atlantis endures not because we expect to find its glowing spires, but because the deep sea remains the last great frontier on our planet, a realm of eternal mystery. Each new discovery on the seabed is a ripple from that same ancient stone, a reminder that while we may never find Plato's specific city, we are forever destined to find its ghost in every wave and every shadow beneath the surface. A name can be a ghost, lingering long after its world has vanished. Beyond the sonar scans and geological surveys lies a quieter, more elusive hunt, one that listens for the faintest echo in the very words we speak. This is the linguistic dream of Atlantis, a search not for stones but for syllables. If the civilization was real, could its name have survived, embedded in the geography and languages of the ancient world? The most obvious clue is right on our maps. The lost continent was named for its first king, Atlas, and the ocean that supposedly swallowed it bears his name to this day, the Atlantic. But this connection circles back to Greek myth, where Atlas was the titan condemned to hold up the celestial heavens. Did Plato borrow this existing name for his fictional king, or was the titan named for a far older, real monarch of a lost land? The puzzle deepens when we look to land. Stretching across North Africa are the Atlas Mountains. This is not a modern label, but an ancient one used by the Greeks and Romans. Could these peaks, standing sentinel near the Strait of Gibraltar, the Pillars of Hercules, be a terrestrial memorial to that same legendary figure, a lasting landmark pointing to a realm that once lay just beyond them? Scholars have sifted through pre-Greek languages, like those of the mysterious Sea Peoples or the ancient Berbers of North Africa, searching for a root that might mean something like large island or watery mountain. Some have looked even farther afield, drawing speculative lines across the ocean. In the 19th century, certain writers noted that the Aztec language Nahuatl has the word atl, meaning water. Could Atlantis then translate to something like place of water or surrounded by water from an ancient shared vocabulary? Similarly, the Native American Choctaw word talwa means town, leading to other imaginative leaps. These connections are tantalizing, but they exist in the realm of linguistic coincidence, not proof. Languages around the world have simple, foundational words for water, earth, and settlement, and they often sound similar by sheer chance. Finding a two-sound match like atl is less like discovering a fingerprint and more like hearing a familiar note in a symphony of global noise, yet the pursuit itself is meaningful. It represents an attempt to catch a whisper on the wind, to believe that a cataclysm great enough to sink a continent might have left a scar not just in the earth but on the tongue. It transforms the myth from a physical location into a story passed down through generations, its name morphing and shifting like the coastline of memory. This is the softest clue of all, a mystery not of excavation but of etymology. It asks us to listen closely to the old names of places and things, to wonder if within them sleeps the last, fading echo of a world that called itself home. The whisper of a name fades against the unyielding laws of rock and gravity. For all the romance of a continent slipping beneath the waves, geology presents a sobering, definitive counter-argument. The dream of a sunken Atlantis, in the literal sense Plato described, crashes upon the hard reality of plate tectonics. Here is the simple, scientific truth: continental crust does not sink. It cannot. Think of the Earth's outer layers like a pot of thick soup simmering on a stove. The continents are like lightweight crackers floating on the denser, hotter soup of the mantle below. They are buoyant, made of granite, which is significantly less dense than the basaltic rock that makes up the ocean floor. When two tectonic plates collide, the denser oceanic plate is the one that is forced downward, sliding beneath the continental plate in a process called subduction. The continent always rides high. It may crumple to form mountain ranges, or it may stretch and fracture, but it does not and cannot be swallowed whole into the abyss. An entire continent-sized landmass vanishing in a single day and night is, from this perspective, a geological impossibility. The forces involved operate over millions of years, not hours. This is the bedrock of the scientific consensus, a reality check that grounds our most extravagant flights of fancy. Yet this does not mean the Earth is static. Land can subside or sink gradually due to shifts in the underlying mantle or the weight of ice sheets melting. Coastlines can change dramatically, as they did at the end of the last ice age when rising seas swallowed vast stretches of inhabited shore, perhaps giving rise to global flood myths. Islands can most certainly vanish, not by sinking but by exploding. A volcanic island like Thera can obliterate itself in a cataclysm, its center collapsing into a caldera that is then flooded by the sea, creating the illusion of a sunken land. These are real, documented processes, terrifying in their own right, but they are not the same as a continent plunging into the deep Atlantic. So where does this leave our lost city? This geological truth does not destroy the myth of Atlantis, it simply transforms it. It shifts the story from a literal historical account to something arguably more powerful, a profound allegory or a magnified memory. The human mind has a tendency to inflate trauma over generations. A catastrophic local event like the eruption of Thera and the tsunami that devastated Minoan Crete could easily evolve in storytelling over centuries into the loss of an entire world. The emotional truth of a culture being wiped away by the sea remains, even if the physical scale has been amplified to mythic proportions. This grounding in geology makes the enduring power of the tale even more remarkable. It proves that the deepest human stories are not bound by fact but by feeling. We are not haunted by a sunken continent of granite, but by the idea of it, by the chilling possibility that everything we build, no matter how grand, rests on foundations that are not permanent. The dream persists not because it is true, but because it feels true, echoing our own vulnerability on a planet that is alive and constantly changing beneath our feet. Definitive proof would shatter our world overnight. not a sonar ghost or a weathered stone, but a clear, undeniable artifact, perhaps a plaque inscribed in an unknown language, found in a context that links it irrefutably to Plato's description. The announcement would trigger a global frenzy unlike any in history. News channels would broadcast nothing else. Social media would erupt with theories, memes, and demands for live underwater footage. Every museum, university, and government would scramble to be part of the story. Archaeology would be thrust into a blinding spotlight, its slow, meticulous methods suddenly expected to deliver instant answers to humanity's oldest question. The initial discovery would only be the beginning of a deeper, more complex revolution. Historians would have to tear up textbooks. The timeline of human civilization would be thrown into chaos. If Atlantis was real and as ancient as Plato claimed, then who were these people? Were they the progenitors of all later cultures, as Donnelly dreamed, or simply a brilliant, isolated society that rose and fell long before Egypt? The discovery would force a radical re-evaluation of prehistory, suggesting advanced social organization and technology at a date we currently consider impossibly early. It would be a humbling reminder of how little we truly know about our own past, and how much history is written not in stone, but in the silent gaps between stones. But what exactly would we find on the seafloor? The romantic vision is of a preserved city, its concentric rings still visible, statues standing guard in the eternal dark. A more likely, yet still profound, scenario might be something less cinematic. Perhaps we would find the scattered foundations of a massive settlement, pottery styles unlike any other, or evidence of a sophisticated canal system on a now submerged coastal plain. It might not be a single city, but a collection of colonies that formed a thalassocracy, a sea empire whose memory was condensed into one legendary capital. Or, most earth-shaking of all, we might find no grand architecture at all, but a geological layer of destruction, a tsunami deposit of incredible scale and age, right where the story said it would be. That would prove the cataclysm was real, turning the myth from a fable into a fossilized memory of a trauma, so vast it never faded from our collective dreams. With discovery comes immense responsibility. The ethical dilemmas would be as deep as the water covering the site. Who owns Atlantis, the country nearest to it? The international community, the descendants of whoever built it, if they could even be identified. The site would be the ultimate treasure and the ultimate target. How could we protect it from looters, from corporations seeking tourist dollars, or from well-meaning but damaging rushed excavations? The pressure to bring artifacts to the surface would be immense, but raising them could destroy them, as preserved materials disintegrate when removed from their cold, high-pressure environment. We might be forced to study it in situ, using robots and virtual reality, leaving the city to sleep in its watery tomb while we visit as digital ghosts. This tension between our desire to possess history and our duty to preserve it would define the century. Finding Atlantis would be more than an archaeological triumph. It would be a mirror for our modern age. It would force us to confront our hunger for answers, our claims over the past, and our capacity for stewardship. The lost city would become a test not of our technology but of our wisdom. So as you drift towards sleep, carry this final what-if with you. The dream of Atlantis is ultimately a dream of reunion, of finding a piece of ourselves we never knew was missing. Its discovery would rewrite our story, challenge our ethics, and forever change our place in the long narrative of time. It is the last great adventure waiting in the quiet dark for a future that may still be written. The true power of Atlantis lies not in its coordinates but in its meaning. It has endured for millennia because it is not one story but many, a layered metaphor that speaks to something fundamental within us. At its heart, it is the dream of a perfect society, a vision of harmony between human ingenuity, divine law, and natural abundance. We yearn for that lost golden age, that proof that paradise was once within our grasp. Yet intertwined with that dream is its shadow, the chilling fear of our own hubris. The myth warns that the greatest civilizations carry the seeds of their own destruction, that pride and greed can unravel even the most glorious tapestry. This duality makes it timeless, a cautionary tale that feels urgently relevant whether we live in an age of empires or algorithms. It is also the ultimate mystery of the deep, a symbol for all that is hidden, unknown, and waiting just beyond the edge of our understanding. The ocean's abyss represents the vast stretches of our own forgotten past, and the tantalizing possibility that profound truths lie buried, waiting for the right moment to surface. And above all, it is a story about longing, a deep ache for a knowledge that was lost, a connection to a wisdom we feel we once possessed but can no longer fully recall. This is why the myth transcends archaeology. In a very real sense, everyone has their own personal Atlantis. It might be a forgotten childhood home, a faded relationship that once felt perfect, a talent left unpracticed, or a future that seemed certain but never arrived. It is any idealized, lost, or deeply yearned for part of our lives that now exists only in memory or imagination, shimmering just beneath the surface of our daily reality. We are all, in some way, citizens of that sunken city, forever trying to remember the shape of its streets. This universal resonance is the myth's true magic. It transforms a simple story about a drowned island into a mirror for the human condition. We listen to the tale of Atlantis and we hear echoes of our own triumphs and failures, our own capacity for creation and self-destruction, our own quiet searches for something more. It is a lullaby for the restless mind, a beautiful, melancholy melody about everything we build, everything we lose, and everything we keep dreaming we might one day find again. We have sailed across a sea of possibilities, from the written word to the ocean floor. Plato gave us the original map, a detailed parable of a utopia undone by its own pride. Scholars offer us the haunting echo of the Minoans, a real island empire shattered by a volcano's fury, suggesting a historical seed for the myth. Adventurers point to the deep Atlantic or the silent eye of the Sahara, places where the landscape itself seems to whisper of a lost design. And seekers of spirit find a different homeland entirely, a realm of crystal consciousness and forgotten psychic power. Each thread is compelling in its own light, yet they cannot be woven into a single, seamless tapestry. This is not a failure of the story, but its greatest strength. Atlantis endures precisely because it refuses to be pinned down. It lives in the liminal space, the twilight zone between history and myth, between geological fact and the boundless terrain of human fantasy. It is a dream that does not demand belief, but rather invites participation. It asks us not to find an answer, but to embark on a question. The beauty of Atlantis lies in its beautiful, unresolvable ambiguity. There is profound comfort in a mystery that has no solution, a story with no final page. It means the journey of wonder never has to end. The search for the lost city, in all its forms, is not a path to a sunken ruin, but a mirror reflecting our own curiosity, our fears of collapse, and our hopes for a wiser, more harmonious world. So as you drift into sleep, let the waves of that ancient story wash over you. You don't need to choose between the philosopher's lesson, the archaeologist's trowel, or the dreamer's crystal vision. You can hold them all at once, a constellation of possibilities shining in the dark. The destination was never a place on a map. The destination is the dream itself, vast, deep, and beautifully, eternally lost. The ocean of history is deep and full of wonders we may never fully uncover. That is the final, gentle gift of this story. Whether you believe Atlantis was a real city swallowed by the sea, a philosopher's brilliant warning, or a dream born from a volcanic eruption, its power remains undimmed. It reminds us that every civilization, no matter how grand, is a delicate construction, a flickering light against the vast dark of time. It speaks to our shared human longing for a golden age and our shared fear of losing everything we have built. More than anything, it proves the enduring strength of a good story, one that can captivate us for over 2,000 years, inspiring explorers, artists, and dreamers across countless generations. So as you let your thoughts settle and sleep begins to draw near, let the gentle waves of this mystery wash over you. Carry with you the image of silent, concentric rings resting in the blue twilight, not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a space for wonder. Sweet dreams of ancient cities and peaceful, watery depths, of advanced knowledge lost and perhaps waiting, and of the quiet comfort found in a timeless tale. If you enjoyed this dreamy journey, consider subscribing for more stories to help you unwind and explore the beautiful mysteries of our past. Thank you for listening, and good night.